Hello, everybody. My name is Neff Irizarry II. I'm the author of Contemporary Latin Jazz Guitar and Volume 2 Solos, available at Share Music Co. I want to thank you all for tuning in for this very special moment with the great Peter Bernstein on guitar. We're going to talk today with him about his great solo on the Dizzy Gillespie classic Con Alma, which is featured in Volume 2 Solos. And you can also watch it and play along with it at my YouTube channel, which you're already at, in the playlist Contemporary Latin Jazz Guitar Volume 2 Solos. As many of you know, there are many guitarists that are featured in the book. Slowly but surely, we will have a moment to interview those of them that are featured in the book. However, I would like for you to consider perhaps subscribing to the channel. In that way, you could help support my efforts to documenting some incredible history about Latin jazz guitar and the jazz guitarists that delved into this wonderful world. Without further ado, let's listen to the great Peter Bernstein and all of the great tips that he will share with us today. Please stick around to the end because we speak a bit about his relationship with the great Jim Hall. All right, so stick around to the end, and thanks for tuning in. Let's continue now. All the best. Okay, ciao. And you know, I have to tell you, I had an interview with Bruce Foreman. And
Oh yeah.
I'm crazy about you, and I'm crazy about Bruce Foreman. I'm crazy about all my elders on guitar, man. And I
Huh?
just completely dropped the ball. I forgot to press record when I was talking to Bruce,
Well,
so I got to call him again. But
funny.
I
That's
should
fun.
tell you as well that Bruce is in the book with.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, you
And
sent a list of
yeah, I
yeah.
sent the list and everything. And first of all, I want to say is thanks for sharing your time, Peter. And
Hey, it's a
Peter.
pleasure, man. No, I remember of course I remember your name and stuff and then when you wrote me about this, like you singled out that solo, but it was because of like something you heard that I was not even aware of. Like you're
Yeah.
talking about Latin rhythms and stuff like that and just playing in 6/8 or whatever. So to me I was just like, well, this maybe I should this is I mean, forget about what your ideas. Like maybe I can learn something
Oh
about
yeah.
what you're hearing that I am gravitating towards, but it's totally not in a conscious way. So
Okay. Yeah.
let me. There's a whole. I know there's a whole world there that I'm not diving into, but it's like, well, that's an entry point because it's like
Yeah.
if
Oh,
it's related to the language that I'm trying to do and deal with, then
absolutely.
yeah, it's just another.
I'm so happy to hear this. And this was great what you said because it was a segue into one of the many questions that I have. And you mentioned this subconscious and how you're informed because you know um uh how we're taught how to swing and what we transcribe and this triplet feel that we're doing. In some ways we're already informed. And when I was listening to what you were doing, and of course what Ed Bickert was doing, and a lot of other guitar players that I didn't transcribe, like Julian Lage and Sco on Afro Blue, things like that, what I noticed from my jazz background, besides being Puerto Rican and knowing that other side of things, that
Right.
a lot of things that you cats are doing are from the and a lot of these traditional players too, that in Latin jazz, it's from this innate experience, this innate sense of playing along with the drums and just playing off of that. And
Yeah.
it's already just built into you. And since you live in New York, and this goes back to when I dropped, when I brought in Bruce Foreman, when I was interviewing Bruce Foreman, he mentioned to me, well, Neff, because I was, because I, basically lived in San Francisco for so long and I was playing in those groups, I was informed. So because you lived in New York for so long, were you informed by somehow by these Latin things? And did you ever do any type of Latin things?
I've never been a part of a Latin group, but I had some records that I checked out.
Okay.
I remember this one Eddie Palmieri record I had. I had it on cassette. Paulo Parumba. I think it's from the late '70s, and I
Yeah,
just loved everything about it. The arrangements, the singing,
yeah,
the
man.
way he wrote for brass, the rhythm section. It was just like I would just listen to it, not knowing anything about the terms, like that this
Mhm.
they're doing a this or that this is a this pattern or anything. I just listened to it and absorbed. It's like wow, that's just beautiful melodies, which have a very specific cultural thing, but also a universal quality.
Yeah.
Just like rhythm is universal. Like I was just like, oh, that's some McCoy kind of influence. Like like he you could tell Eddie Palmieri had huge ears and is building and stirring a huge pot of lots of lots of ingredients, flavorful things that are all making it the special thing that it is. But I don't know, to what you were saying before, I think that I don't know if I mean it's innate and but it's just in the way that all language is just some form of humans emitting something a little more sophisticated than a grunt. So it's just like that's every language, but it's just like the beginnings of it are all the same, but then the specificities of it, the specifics of each language is so deep and so really local,
Yeah.
but since the world is local in a different way now, it's like what have you heard and what do you gravitate towards and go to check out. So I can't say living in New York because I wasn't like going to the clubs that played salsa or like I say, never played in a band like that. I used to be a neighbor of Larry Harlow. I would see him walking along 86th Street. I used to see him
Okay.
on the street all the time. I was like, I know this guy. And then I finally figured out who he was, and like he has an interesting story too because he's a musical interloper culturally, like I feel just as a white kid playing jazz music. I mean, it's all something you have to decide. Like you want to be around those people that do it, and all those people are they're a diverse bunch too. So
Exactly.
it's just like I think it's kind of like when you were talking about I was thinking like it's the same thing with blues. I mean, you can get to the feeling of the blues through Stanley Turrentine.
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily listen to the very to Big Bill Broonzy in the beginning of like acoustic blues
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because you can
Rumsfeld.
get some of that
Yeah.
through. And of course, it's going to be deeper, and you're going to hear Stanley Turrentine with new ears when the further you go back to see where he's coming from, gospel music
Yeah.
and the blues and how that all connects.
Yeah.
But I mean, with American music, with the exception of really the Latin thing, you can kind of get it all from Ray Charles in a way because he mixed it all together, and it's just like I think language is like that. But I think once get when you get deeper into it, like that, it's just like you want to know what the people that really specialize in that call this because they're going to have their own.
Yeah.
It's just like any community has their rituals,
Yeah.
and their
Exactly.
sound and their etiquette and the way it's so connected. Like it's just beautiful how much music is in language. I mean, I heard some people, Jamaicans speaking English, and that's just like it's not a foreign language, but it's so different.
Yeah.
And it's just like you can even speak the same language many, many, many different ways. That it's like I
Absolutely.
can't understand a person from Scotland. I'd have to really, you know, immerse myself in that to understand what
Absolutely.
of course you hear it as English, you catch some words, and but to really get with the flow, I think it's the same thing with rhythms, especially. So I can get some 6/8 kind of thing, just try to listen to the drummers, and then I'm you know getting a little bit of what they're informed by, even though I'm on the outside of it,
Yeah.
not knowing where what they're doing is coming from. Like, oh, they're doing that thing,
Yeah.
so this makes me have to try to phrase in a certain way. But that's the fun of it, is just like taking a tune and even the way you treat a tune rhythmically.
Mhm.
is going to affect your phrasing, which is going to affect what you play. So as an improviser, the thing you want to stay away from is like just okay, I'm going to play my solo
Yeah.
on every tune. It's all the same shit.
Yeah.
So, but on some level, every Stanley Turrentine solo is kind of the same. It's just like every Bird solo. It's like in order to have a style, you have to have, I don't want to say catchphrases, but there's a certain feeling in the way your cadence unfolds. That's personal to you. So in a way, you do want to play the same solo on every song. Otherwise, you're a chameleon. But musically speaking, like in order to make it not exactly the same solo, the idea is to respond to as much of what's around you as possible, from voicings to rhythms to just the sounds of the instrument. The register you play in might have to do with where the drummer's playing and how their tom tom sound or what it's like. We're
Exactly.
all trying to we're all trying to make a picture that's where all the parts come through, but all the parts are part of the picture. So
Exactly. They come together succinct.
yeah.
You said a lot of great things, Peter, and it's exactly what I would want to hear from one of my heroes. Is and there was a lot of things that all the questions that I wanted to ask you, you touched on them, and you know,
Well, that's my answer for every question. No, it doesn't. It's just like a solo. You just okay,
yeah,
go.
man.
Okay, how many? You want 16 bars or no? I'm just kidding. I can
Exactly.
stretch it out. I can no.
So, so when you mentioned about reacting to the players around you, on that recording date on Con Alma, you've got Joe Farnsworth there playing. Now, when you guys were setting up to play Con Alma, you just called it off and you just did it, or he didn't speak about, well, I'm going to do this, or was there
I
any?
just said let's just put it like a 6/8 thing. That's as specific as I got. And instead of swinging the bridge, maybe we could keep it all 6/8. Like that was my idea to kind of because everybody goes to swing on the bridge, and
Yeah,
that's fine too. And you can
yeah,
swing on the solos a bit. I mean, I let the drummer decide what they want to do. I think
yeah,
that's basically,
yeah,
on some tunes, if it's your original composition, then I might say, well, I need this here just to make this part come, work as part of some compositional story. But even that would just be for the melody. And,
of
and
course.
you know, once you get into the form, I think the whole idea of playing with people that you love and trust is like,
100%.
hey, whatever they do is what they thought was the right thing to do at the
Absolutely.
time. And that's all I can try to do too, is the right thing, you know,
Well,
reacting to what's happening or initiating things. But that was the only thing. Let's just keep this 6/8. And I just said, let's play this little B flat pedal point in between as an intro
yeah,
after the head and then between the solos. And I don't even know if we stuck to that. Maybe we did.
you
I
did.
mean,
You
I think
did.
we did, but that was the idea. So there's this little interlude, and the rest of it is the tune because since it's not my composition, and all the guys already have a frame of reference for knowing the song, whatever version they've heard and whatever experience they've had playing the song,
Hmm.
they bring that. So it's a common ground thing where let's play it, and here's a suggestion of how to do it, but
Yeah.
no more specific than that. Like no more, you know.
Okay.
And I think that's
Well,
just
I love what Joe did because, if you think about the Drummond tradition, you think about how Elvin would play a 6/8 with Coltrane
right,
on Afro Blues.
right,
Blue,
right.
he didn't do that. He actually played more of this bembe pattern, which would be in
Really,
6/8. So ting 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 ticking ting 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 ticking ting ting. And
right.
what I didn't show you was in the book, I actually broke down some phrases that you did, and I wrote specifically, I put the rhythm there, and I want to share that with you
Okay.
before I ask you any questions and before I proceed with any other questions. And um, yeah, let me go ahead and share the screen here.
Okay.
And and um, as you can see here, what I did here, I go, well, in this chapter, I'm just talking about emphasizing the last rhythmic cell. So the 16th and the 8ths there, right?
Mhm.
So in these phrases here, you can see that instead, normally what you would do on the first part is, and this is just completely an academic thing that
Right.
is just with the bembe pattern how it is, and it's perfectly normal to play the last rhythmic cell over the first part, and that's like a contraclave, which this would be a clave or a rhythmic ostinato, as you know, and
Right.
you'd react to it depending upon, like you had said, what the drummer's playing. So in these phrases, it shows that you line up with the end there, and the same thing when it was in 4/4, right?
Hmm.
And then you're gonna see some of my questions, and then I show. Well, let's see, in 251, I show. Let's go here. Let me see here, man. So, and then I show again, yeah, you're superimposing the last rhythmic cell over the first part, right? So titis, tis, titis, tis, titis, tis, titis, tis, like that. You do that
Hmm.
quite a bit, actually, which is really amazing. And especially here, you've got ta ta, ti ta ta, ta ta, right? For the
Hmm.
E flat major seven and the last 2/5 there, right? When you
Right, to get to the second part, right?
yeah, and it's just remarkable, man. And then I have on 260
It,
where in this section superimposing 4/4 polyrhythms over 6/8, and you can see I got
uh,
these other cats here, and you know. It really holds up, man. You got this duplet here. Now, the duplet things now, I spoke to Steve Kahn. I don't know if you know, but I was a student of Steve's, and I think from that conversation we had a long time ago, I think I mentioned that, and your eyebrows went up, and I got a feeling that we should have hung after that, after that concert in April Jazz. But a lot of things happen, and Pete, I know you know this, that if you allow me to say that, I know you know this, that there's a lot of things that fall into like this feel thing that it's you're not necessarily going for that, but something happens in the time that you just play like that. And and I think these duples, when you do them, you're implying four, right? And at the same time you're laying back, because what else would it be? Either that you were trying to go for ta 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 ta, but this is 1 2 3 4 right there. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Kind of. You mean so? I'm playing
You're playing a
straight.
four. Yeah, you're playing like 4/8 notes. So tiki ti tis the dun dun ti four. So taka ta tas the 1 2 3 4. So it's
Right.
the first one here of the C minor. So taka ta tas the 1 2 3 4. So 1 2 3 4 the 1 2 3 4 the, which is just amazing, man.
I don't know. I mean, if you say it is, I mean, I'm just like I'm thinking. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I try to think rhythmically first. Like I try to think of a rhythm and then put the notes to kind of make the rhythm pop out. But
Well,
I can't honestly say that I'm always doing that because, like everyone, that plays a guitar, basically just pushing buttons, and it's distracting to like look at. Oh, I
yeah.
can play that button,
Well,
and it's like you're kind of hearing melodically. But in my, I mean, I try to practice this, and I try to work on. Sorry,
that's okay. That's okay.
yeah, no, I try to think about the concept of think about placement first. What you want to play, what you want to put
Yeah.
in this spot. I mean, before the what, it's where. Where do you want to put anything? If you're like walking into an empty room, what does this room need? What should I put there? Some kind of table, some kind. So then the details come in later, but this is all happening in kind of a split second thing. But it's just trying to think about how to fill the space, and the space can be 2 bars, 8 beats, or it could be 8 bars. It could be a bigger space depending on the size of the room in a way, like how much space there actually is to fill. But and of course the tempo, how fast the beats are going by is that's the thing.
Hmm. Well,
That's what it's about too. So it's just like I try to lead with the idea of what should I, but I'm invariably I'm distracted by the harmony. I don't want to say distracted, but I'm concerned and trying to be like, well, I need to make this phrase have its own shape melodically. Otherwise, because I am playing notes, I'm not just hitting a, 1 or 2 tones or 3 tones on a drum, which actually that makes for a lot of possibilities too. Like how a drummer orchestrates their idea rhythmically over the drum set. So
Yeah.
everything you make a sound on is an instrument.
Yeah.
So so,
Yeah.
but we have all these these pitches, and we're trying to create a harmonic picture with the pitches. So it's impossible to only think about rhythms, but I try to lead with rhythm. I try to think like rhythm is more important because of the fact that it doesn't need notes, whereas notes automatically need rhythm because they're put someplace.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Everything is existing in some kind of rhythmic frame.
Well, it's great that you mentioned this.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
This
So
is
that's all to say that this is totally like I don't know what I did and if it like how I would do it again in the sense that like, oh, let me make sure I do a duple on the last like
no,
I
no, no.
wouldn't think that way. So but whatever process is making me phrase around the 6/8 feeling or specifically the pattern that the drums are playing or that I'm even hearing somewhere in comping or whatever,
Yeah,
how to play around that and make variations, just like you're making variations with eighth notes or quarter notes, and
of course.
and just
Yeah,
trying to
because
syncopate basically. Yeah,
I noticed that in a lot of these places sometimes, and that was another question that I was going to ask you, that what I'm glad that you reinforced that you're thinking about rhythm first that way. You're rhythm based, and and coming from my heritage, I am as well. And what I felt, and I felt this a long time ago about your playing overall, Pete, was that you especially on this recording too, is that you play in like that magical spot in between the ride and the hi-hat and the snare, at simultaneously in between what the bass player and the piano is playing, which is where we all want to be, in the flow, and McLaughlin, I have to quote John on this, Papa John, about this, that he says a great thing, that we invite, when we're playing in a magical space and we're not thinking, and when we're not thinking, we're drawing the listener in, and but as soon as we start thinking, we cut off that we cut off that connection that blocks them from really enabling the listener to come with us and believe everything that we're playing. And
yeah.
and
Well,
I
I agree with that, but
yeah.
I also feel like when you say the listener, like that's people have all kinds of taste,
That's
and
true.
what
You're
people
right.
hear. The longer I play music and the longer I'm around, and just the whole phenomenon, it's like the more I wonder, like, what do people hear? Like I
I
know I'm trying to develop my ears as a musician so that I'm hearing,
what they
and
hear.
our whole mission as musicians is to like develop some kind of slightly superhuman hearing, whether it's like perfect pitch. That's one obvious way to,
Mhm.
but it's also just like just vibrations in general.
Mm.
Um, you know, just density and rhythm, of course, and like because we're if you just go throughout your whole day and you keep time, all the sounds you hear are going to relate to that basic pulse. And then
Yeah.
there's the thing, of course, of having music not be in a pulse but be freer of pulse. So to me, it's like it's a combination. Like all the greatest musicians I play with, it wasn't like I could say, "Oh, they're on top" or "they're behind the beat," or it's like they had a big beat. They
Mhm.
widened the beat, so there's more room for all these things to, vibrate within it. So, and drummers, bass, anyone, it's just a flow that where the beat is wider. So that's what I've aspired to, and I hear myself failing on both fronts, dragging and being on top of it. Like in many cases, it's just rare when you actually find the thing. And then of course it's fleeting because then you have another phrase to play that's not we're not grooving in the sense that we're playing all repetitive parts
Yeah.
and making them groove by doing them over and over again.
Yeah.
So when things are free flowing and you're trying to improvise melodies and rhythm is a huge part of how people I think maybe what you're saying, the list like how they take in what you're saying has to do with cadence and
Yeah.
narrative flow. Like it's not just a bunch of
No.
stuff. But I mean, then again, that theory is disproved because a lot of players that just play a bunch of stuff are super popular. So, and to me, it's like I think it seems that their priority is to play a bunch of stuff rather than to place it in interesting and play around with the different ways you can play stuff. Everything is placed in the same place with precision, and it's just a density. It's just like, whatever. This car wins because it goes faster. And when you're dealing with a car race, yeah, the one that goes faster, it does win. That's a quantifiable thing. So, but people seem to like, a lot of people like music that has that same element of just like density and speed and variation of rhythm, some kind of triplet feel that is hard, almost impossible to notate without lots of little, like it's very difficult to even say what that is. It's undefinable. It's kind of like you can hear it or you don't hear it. And I
Exactly.
hear that kind of open wideness in beat.
Hmm.
Like when I hear Billie Holiday, I don't just hear that she's laid back. I hear that the beat, she's opened up the beat, and she even hears 4 beats or 8 beats as just this big thing to play around. Say in a totally different way, Jack DeJohnette has a similar concept, or Tony Williams, the way they expand rhythm. It's just like a feeling of and then other people are much more precise, and that can be exciting too, because that's the way they
Absolutely.
are, as people, or as what their aesthetic is musically. So I think it takes all kinds, and the wider your beat is, it seems like the more people you can play with, the
Yeah.
more fun you can have with just feeling other people's feel really, when because that's all it is. All music is just, every instrument is just feel and touch,
Yeah.
and then can you, the thing is, ideas, keeping ideas flowing where you don't repeat yourself and kind
Mhm.
of fall into the same patterns. That's the long-term challenge, I think. But
Absolutely.
to me, the greatest players on every instrument just have a wide beat, and there's many places where it falls and feel from phrase to phrase. Like Miles, this sense of time is just so like,
Oh yeah.
can be so, it's a very incisive, but then when he wants to float, he can float, and he floats successfully because of that, really feeling obviously where it is. And I think Billie Holiday was the same way. Bird, Sonny Rollins. I mean, just all the guys that we think of as being rhythmic players. Joe Henderson. It's just like you can't stretch it unless you're firmly rooted in
Right.
something, and that root, gets deeper, and that's kind of how you
Sure
can
does.
expand.
Yeah.
But I'm saying all this is just like, there's so many rhythms and rhythmic, you know, kind of things I have to study, and knowing the names of them is not as good. Knowing the names of different kind of 6/8 patterns, but only
Well, there
make
is.
that place deeper.
Yeah. Well, the focus of this section in my book, because since it's contemporary Latin jazz guitar, and I wanted to get more, I wanted to contribute something to the guitar community that would be from a point of a commonplace, right? So this 6/8 and this bembe, this basic one, is something that everybody does. And there's lots of examples. So I wanted to show examples of you and everyone so that it inspires others to go deeper. Now, you
Mm-hmm.
know, this bembe, it goes to, because this is all from Afro-Cuban. So this
Of
is from
course, yeah,
Bata. And there's a book by Yoel Paez that I'll send you a link to that.
yeah,
And I'll
yeah.
share some stuff with you.
I
And
would love it. Yeah,
and there's just Bata, where they have a bunch of different triplet patterns that are just, polyrhythmic patterns that are going together, and they interact with each other, which are incredible. And
yeah.
I have a new record that I'm doing with Jimmy Haslip, and I have a lot of tunes with that going on. I'll send you
Very
some of
cool.
that too, so you
I
check
want
it.
to hear that, man, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and how it is. So yeah, so that was the main thing. And like I said, I think there is a lot of well, first of all, I think that we would be all more informed if there wasn't for that Cuban embargo, man. Because
Right.
when you think about Chano Pozo and Dizzy and Diz, what they did already to give us Con
Yeah.
Alma and Manteca,
Of
if we
course. That's a
if
long time ago. That's 1947 or something, right?
I
That's a
know,
long. Yeah.
and it's still fresh, and
Yeah.
imagine if we would have had another 50 years that it would be
Of
open.
that open, yeah, of course, man. That's so true.
You
That's so
know,
true.
but
Yeah,
in a way, I'm glad that we got the Brazilian side of things, that enriched our plan,
right.
as well. So so yeah, and another thing with this 6/8 stuff, it is extremely spiritual and extremely paganistic. That's with the gods. So I think in some ways, some people might think it's devil music, but they thought the blues was devil music anyhow, and jazz.
Yeah,
So and just to keep it open and diverse, for all people. You know?
right. No, that's just like it's kind of it could sound like a very ignorant statement when you say it's all the blues, but it's actually it's not the blues, but it's the wider idea of what that is about, which you could say it's all the whatever, and that would include blues. It just depends on where you're coming from, but I
Exactly,
think
man.
that's there's a commonality in that in the spirituality of music, even though you know the rituals are different and
Mhm.
this intonation is different.
Yeah.
Someone was telling me recently they were in Istanbul and they heard the chants 4 times a day or whatever. At certain times of the day, you hear this like people singing, you know,
Yeah,
and
the
that's just
culture.
like that's just so. It sounds a lot like you know American music and all kinds of any kind of
Absolutely, the
spiritual
flamenco.
music that
Yes.
sounds like crying, the moaning. That's it's all the same thing,
Yeah, man.
because people are all the same, yet they're so different in terms of
Exactly.
what's on the outside. But we're as musicians, we're concerned with what's on the outside because that's what makes it sound like you know. I guess you
Yeah.
could say it's all folk music. There's a quote from Louis Armstrong. It's all folk music because I never heard any horses play anything. It's all people. It's all comes from people. So.
That's a
But
good
yeah, I would
one.
love to. I need. That's what I need a book. I need an entryway into somebody laying out what's what and where it came from and just some kind of context.
Yeah,
Because I
definitely.
pieced together some context of the jazz history going back from Jelly Roll Morton and Louis Armstrong and Ellington and Fats Waller
Yeah.
through bebop. I mean, I've pieced it and helped. I was helped by some
Oh, wow.
checking out some books about history and then got
Yeah.
some context in my own just from listening. But that's over many years of study. One very, specific kind of giant tree, but a specific tree, and there's many other trees. It's a
Hmm.
forest full of,
Absolutely, and they're all
of
interconnected.
musical trees. Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
but
So,
I would love to. Yeah, that'd be great. That sounds great to get a book about
yeah,
rhythm,
man.
how they're related, and what's all.
Yeah, at least some of those things. Yeah, man. I'll definitely. I wanted to show you something else here. Um, and I think basically you answered everything, but I just to be transparent, and I'm gonna send you the book when it's done, of course.
Okay, please, yeah.
And then um on 263, this is another thing, contrasting between playing with the bembe pattern and implying a sense of four, and this is the
See,
same
yeah.
thing, you having the wide beat. I love the what you said there, and I'm so happy that we got it captured, man. And
I'm,
then
I'm always going to defer to the whatever like the 4/4 so I can contrast and just kind of maybe touch base with that. That's the only thing I can say that's
yeah,
any consciousness about that, but or
yeah,
just to contrast the phrasing. Maybe
ab-
it's just like yeah,
absolutely. And as you can see, with these other guitar players, the same thing, regardless of ethnicity, time period. There was some overlap, between
yeah,
you and Edgardo Miranda. He was a New Yorker. And the same
yeah.
thing with Carlos Emilio El Gordo Morales,
I don't
which
know
was
these guys
the
playing.
guitar
Yeah.
player from Iraquere. You know,
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
yeah, man.
Cuban. Yeah.
And you can see, you see what you're doing is exactly in line with what these guys would do, man. And and it's like, I get goosebumps when I look at all this, that we're all connected. And you
Yeah.
know what I want to do, and so much of your philosophy I agree with completely, Peter. And what I hope that bringing to light what you're doing here and comparing it to these other guitar players, it shows guys that look, many beginners and intermediate, they have trouble. They feel, well, I only want to do this style, and they forget that music as a whole is meant to, in my opinion, is that it's meant to enrichen your playing. You should listen to as many things as possible and get
Of course.
informed. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and be a Latin
Yeah.
jazz player or a blues
Right.
player. It means that it just, gets it's another tool for you. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, yeah, listening to non-guitar players is a huge thing. Listening to singers, to me, just to try to get some kind of sense of phrasing that's
Yeah.
where if you listen to another guitar player, that's great, and you can figure out, oh, this is how they did that. But if you're listening to a human voice, they didn't make that sound on a guitar, so
Yeah.
you automatically have an obstacle, which you have to find some kind of, if not a creative, then a personal solution to that. So
Exactly.
that's, I mean, listening beyond,
Yeah.
instrument is a huge thing just for that reason, just because you have to try to approximate
Exactly.
what other instruments do
Yeah,
naturally,
man. I completely
voices.
agree. Yeah, since this is dealing with just guitar players to make it easier for them so that they get
Yeah,
inspired if they did it. But
yeah.
however, I
But
don't
the
know if
world of guitar is huge too. I mean, I
I
listen
know,
to
man.
guitar players, and a lot of them are like, "Well, that's not like the instrument that I play at all." So it is like listening to another instrument on some level.
Exactly.
So it's all just,
You
yeah.
know,
How can you add it to your vocabulary in some way that's not super contrived?
exactly. But Pete, man, thanks
Yeah.
for the
Thank
interplay
you.
and everything you're catching upon. I was gonna mention one thing when you mentioned Eddie Palmieri. I interviewed Carl Ratzer. Do you remember Carl Ratzer?
Yeah. From
He
Vienna,
lives,
right?
he's still
Yeah.
alive. He lives in Vienna, and he invited me to his apartment, and we hung out, and we played together, and I
Wow.
recorded him, and he played a lot with Ray Montilla and Joe Chambers, and I asked him about those recordings where he was playing Latin stuff, and he said, Neff, I just checked out the piano players. I didn't check any guitar. And it's true.
Yeah.
You really want to check out the piano players and get that in. And
Yeah.
because
This is true of jazz too.
that's right, man. I agree completely.
Yeah.
I agree completely, man. That's where
Yeah.
it's at, man. But there was one thing that I wanted to ask you was that I know that from a little bit of research, I know that you're, one of your mentors and one of the guitar players that you love a lot is Jim Hall.
Yeah.
And Jim is he's one of my favorites, and I love him, and I transcribed a lot of them, and I met him when he was playing at Scullers, and he was playing through an old Gibson amp, and he had some pedals,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
was
He
so
used to bring that
lovely.
around. Yeah. Yeah.
And what I want to ask you is that a lot of things in that solo are a lot of Jim Hall things, and
Hmm.
what I want to ask you was that two things. When your rhythmic concept, you talked about what you're doing and going there, but are there specific things that you can pinpoint that you practiced and that were maybe inspired by Jim or not inspired by Jim? Or because, and then can you recommend like a solo of Jim in 6/8 that I was trying to think of something, or
Yeah.
maybe something
I,
in bluesette would be the closest in 3/4, right?
yeah. Yeah. He
What do
did
you?
like to play in 3/4. He has a beautiful song, uh, "Valse Hot."
Yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah,
someday my
man.
prince. Not Valse Hot. I'm sorry. Waltz New. It's called.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
something wrong
False
with
Hot
Valse
is
Hot.
the other one.
Waltz
Yeah,
New. Waltz New is someday my prince will come in. And he wrote a line over that.
hmm
Um, that's 3/4, but that's really waltzy.
yeah.
And he
That
has a
sounds like
beautiful arrangement of "With a Song in My Heart" that he used to play in 3/4 that changed keys after the second half, after the first half,
wow.
between C and D flat, which is waltzy, also.
Yeah,
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, Jim, just being around him a bit, hearing him play a lot, and getting to take a couple lessons where we, played, and then getting to play with him on a couple of occasions, like outside,
yeah,
uh, of like in a real situation, concert, and did a couple of festivals way back, and it was just the sound that he made and his lyricism, the projection of his very unhurried, kind of just like eloquent, a few wisely chosen words. That's what his solos, sound like to me. So that was a great influence because, of course, like any young person, I'm trying to develop my technique, and I'm trying to, listening to horn players and piano players, they can wail, there's a certain density that I always felt I couldn't get to, just because, I had technical limitations, and the guitar is technically limited. You can play fast on it, but to get the phrasing where you're speaking the language of the horn players and of the great pianists like come out of Bud Powell and stuff like that. It's just very luring to just play faster and faster, get lighter and lighter strings, lower that action as much as you can, just so you can just fly. And I appreciate that, and I love Coltrane as much as anybody, but I didn't feel like it sounded good when I did that, And so Jim was a great influence in terms of like, it's about getting a big sound on every note. If you do that, a note with a nice note with a big sound can be, can hit you harder than 25 notes. So don't quantify it. Just try to, take from good examples of just like, sound and phrasing, placement, lyricism, and hey, that's the faster other people play, great. The slower I can play. It's about contrast anyway. I would play with a lot of horn players, and I'm like, I'm not going to try to keep up with these guys. I have to present a different type of story, completely. And Jim was a great example of like, you can play with not that many notes, and that's it's beautiful. Jim would say, and I say the same thing, like, he's like, I'm playing as fast as I can, which I also do. And I'm trying to push my technique further than it was where I was, 30 years ago when I was a student.
Thank you for tuning in to the interview with the great Peter Bernstein. That last line, 30 years ago when he was a student, is applicable to now, the new generations that are learning how to play. Thank you so much for your support. Keep on keeping on. Be motivated. Be curious. Support the channel so we can have more great interviews. And get the book, Sabor y Sisu. I'm Neff Irizarry. And over and out. See you next time. Ciao.